How's it going, everybody? And welcome back to the channel if you haven't been here in a while. I wanted to cover real quick, well, as quickly as I can anyway. I wanted to recap my CCDE written exam experience and talk a little bit about the preparation strategies that I used for it, as well as the exam itself, um, the my go forward plan, if you will, on how I'm going to be prepping for the practical exam. So, uh, for those, I've talked to people at Cisco Live, especially at the CCIE party. I talked to quite a few people that are actually going after the DE as well. Some scored a little bit better than me on the written exam, and kudos to you. You know who you are. So, what I wanted to do is talk a little bit about the DE, the reason I'm going after DE, and so the mindset, things like that. So I did pass. The exam itself was 110 questions. You have 2 hours to take it. It took me right about an hour to take the test. It was basically 2 questions a minute on average. Some questions took longer than others. And your standard question pool, right? You had multiple question with multiple choices, single answer, multiple choice, multiple answer. There might have been some drag and drop. I honestly don't. Yeah, there was some drag and drop. Put things in order, stuff like that. Your standard Cisco question pool was there. The questions themselves, and one question I get is how hard is it to take? And to be honest with you, that is going to be subjective on the exam itself for the person taking it. So, my opinion on the DE written was it was fairly straightforward for the bulk of the questions that were asked. The reason why I say it that way is keep in mind that I've been, in October of this year, I've been a CCIE for 9 years. So, it was a recertification thing for me. It was at live. It was a free exam. I had been prepping for it for a little bit. Nothing specific, but I had been prepping for it. So for me, it was a way to recertify my CCIE. And the cool thing is, my 10 years is October of 2025. So about 16 months from now or so, I will hit my 10 years. And my goal is once I hit my 10 years with my IE, I'm going to go emeritus. So there's no real reason for me to keep it active. So that and it gives me lots of flex, opens me up to a lot of other opportunities and learning opportunities and things like that to dig into that basically remove me from having to ever worry about recertifying. And the DE written was a I'm glad I have the technical background that I do because it definitely helped. So the core competency that I feel like you need to have is a very strong understanding of the enterprise technology stack. So if you are somebody at the CCIE level in the enterprise track, you will do well. So that means that if you already have a strong routing and switching background, which I do, and that you have dove into Cisco SD-WAN, and you have a understanding of how Cisco SD Access works with either DNA or Catalyst Center, you should do well. There was a fair amount of service provider based questions, meaning, customer has MPLS layer 3 VPN, and then they would go through whatever scenario. So MPLS layer 3 VPN, again, a core competency on the routing and switching, now enterprise infrastructure, CCIE, something you're definitely going to want to know. There was also a fair amount of security questions regarding VPN, because VPNs are very, very popular. It's a transport mechanism, and to me, if you're going to be a route switch guy or gal, you should really be very comfortable with VPNs as well. So one of the things that I got really good with and know really well is VPNs. As a matter of fact, I've got the CCNP Security VPN concentration exam. I think it actually expired because I I took it once, like a while back, and I think it expired. I had to go back and look, but I did have the specialization for a long time, but um, I could go back and get it again. Eventually, I will. So now that we've covered those pieces, the other thing that a lot of questions that I've gotten are, what study resources did you use? And the answer to that question is, and we'll take a look at um, we'll dive into more specifics. We have to talk a bit about the difference between the written and the lab. Now, I haven't taken the practical, so I have no idea what it looks like. I have taken the written exam, and we'll take a look at the practical as well. And based off of what I've been reading, the practical is you have to go to a Cisco location to take it, just like you would a CCA lab exam. So the practical is given there. Now, I did log into the CCIE portal. I do have DE is now available in the drop down for me. Is same thing with enterprise wireless and infrastructure, as well as service provider, because I have a CCNP and service provider as well. So if we look at the DE written exam and we review the exam topics, the interesting thing about this, if you expand these out, they are very, very broad and they are very, very generic, in my opinion. Unlike, and there's a lot to cover. So there's a lot of pieces in here that you need to be very, very familiar with. And in my opinion, when you're looking at how the exam structure is laid out, and if you look at the practical exam topics, it's basically the same thing, right? There's the written exam and the practical. They're written very similarly. I haven't compared down to the bullet point or the way that each question or bullet point is written, but based off of a quick review of what I'm seeing here, they look pretty close. So what that basically tells me that you need to be really, really familiar with the capabilities of everything networking. So now one of the things that you'll see here is that for an overview of enterprise technologies covered in this, you can look at the core technology list. So you have this. Now, I did not look at this, but now that we are, we'll take a look at what this covers. So there's a lot of technologies that you need to dig into. So you obviously have transport technologies, Ethernet, DW, or wavelength, division multiplexing, both core and dense, coarse and dense. You have layer 2 control plane, then you have layer 3 control plane, then you have virtualization, then you have SD-WAN, QoS, security. So there's a lot of technologies in here you need to be familiar with. So if you look here, you have the core technology list, right? So this will definitely help. So it's basically the same thing. So I'll go ahead and just close that one out. But then you have these additional areas of expertise. So the way that I was talking to folks that actually have the DE, Daniel Dibb, he was the one guy that I know at Cisco Live that comes, that I get to see every time I go. They have these, so you get 2 4-hour scenarios. 3 are predetermined for you, and then you get to pick one area. So you get to pick one of these as one of your elective examples. So it could be workforce mobility, on-prem and cloud services, and then large-scale networks. So I would probably go large-scale networks, just because of the fact that that's an area of comfort for me. So if we were to expand this, so again, it's going to basically be the stuff that we've already covered. So transport technologies, layer 2 control plane, layer 3 control plane, network virtualization, QoS, EVPN, security, automation, all that good stuff that goes into that. Now, why is all of this relevant? Well, in my opinion, in order for you to effectively attack a technology, and or a certification exam for you to be comfortable with going after it and being able to answer the questions that are being asked of you and walk through the scenarios and things like that. You have to have a solid understanding of how the technologies work. So that's the key thing here. So what my intention to do, if, and if we I'm gonna actually rewind just a little bit. What I've My background as a routing and switching CCIE is already based, right? I have a strong technical foundation, and that really helped. Now, one of the things that I definitely told people that are looking for like the key things that they should study is strong foundation in networking first and foremost, and then you should have a strong foundation in service provider as well as security, because those seem, even though the CCDE v3, it was a paradigm shift from v2 that was heavily focused in service provider. There's still quite a bit in service provider, in my opinion. So not as much as what I can grasp from going through all the CCDE v2 content that I've listened to, but still a fair amount. So what I would do by going through and understanding how these technologies work is, in order to prepare for the core technology list, right? Is you should know, and again, if you're studying for anything expert level, you should be well versed in any of these capabilities. So what does that mean? Well, that means that you're probably going to have to lab things up. You're probably going to have to read up on something. I mean, that's kind of the whole point of it, right? So in order for you to be able to answer questions about the technologies, you have to understand how they work. So that core technical foundation is going to be key if you plan on being successful. So what that means to me is that you have a lot of labbing to do. I know I do. Not because I don't know some of these. I mean, most of this stuff I do know, and I could explain the differences. Now, if you get down to into the weeds, specifically like MLD version 1 versus version 2, I honestly don't know off the top of my head. So this is one of those things where if you are looking through the exam blueprint and you're looking for the key concepts that you need to understand, anything that doesn't jump out at you anything that jumps out at you of I don't know what that is off the top of my head, I would definitely recommend you taking the time to look into that, whether it's just a reading up on what the difference between MLD, multicast listener discovery, so that's IPv6 IGMP, version 1, version 2, don't know off the top of my head. I know what MLD is. It's how IPv6 endpoints signal the network that they want to receive IPv6 multicast traffic. Say that's what IGMP does for IPv4, right? It signals that an IPv4 multicast receiver signals to the network that it wants to receive IPv4 multicast traffic. So knowing that, and knowing that the snooping, who's actually on at the switch level, who's actually looking for it, and querier, who's still looking for the information. So knowing what these technologies are, I have to dive into a little bit about MLD v1, MLD v2. Now, I do know the difference between v2 and v3 IGMP. Source-specific multicast for IGMP v3 is supported where it's not in v2. So if you're going to run source-specific multicast, then you need to have v3 enabled on the interface facing the receiver. So there's some digging that I had to go into. Fate sharing, I understand how that works. Virtualization, very well versed in that. Now, as you get further on down the line, you need to be basically an expert in every routing protocol. So that's where this comes into play. You need to understand how they work. So that means that if you don't know something about EIGRP or ISIS, especially those of you that are coming from the routing and switching track, where IS to IS and RIP are not routing protocols that are called out. IS to IS is called out in the service provider track, but RIP kind of fallen by the wayside. Not as widely deployed. It's actually trashed on quite a bit. But as a CCIE, my opinion is you should be extremely knowledgeable on all 5 routing protocols. I am. I can get them all working. I can verify them. I can get them operational. I can redistribute between them. I can control the routing. So, but that's what I would expect from a route switch CCIE. That's how I look at it. And even more so from a service provider CCIE, because you're going to be covering all the routing protocols. You should know them all. And to be honest with you, I think Cisco does a disservice. Even if the enterprise, you're not going to see IS to IS as commonly, the reality of it is you actually do. If you run ACI in your data center, guess what? IS to IS is used to do all the connectivity between your spines and your leaves. If you're dealing with obviously EIGRP, because Cisco proprietary routing protocol, RIP. If you don't know RIP, you should know RIP, just because of the fact that it's a routing protocol. And I have worked with several small business customers that work on or have prosumer grade hardware, which means it's not quite Cisco. It's not even Cisco small business. They might go out and get like a Netgear or a D-Link hardware, and the only routing protocol that's supported on that particular piece of equipment is RIP version 2, because it's an open standard routing protocol, and it's the hardware itself isn't meant to really be a enterprise grade router, but it does have routing functionality, so it can run RIP. So can you run RIP on a router? You sure can. FTD, I don't believe you can. So if you have scenarios like that, those would be scenarios where you probably have to rethink your design. But at any point, you need to understand all the unicast routing protocol operations. So you need to be able to go through all of this stuff. So guess what? Loop-free paths, I understand that, but I really haven't dove into IGP LFA, loop-free alternate. So that's another thing that I have to go dig into. So route aggregation, fault isolation, route sharing, redundancy, metric-based traffic flow and modification. So policy-based routing, got it. NAT, got it. Subnetting, got it. Rib-fib relationships, got it. Multicast concepts, MSDP, Anycast, I know how to get it working. So do I need to go back through it? Sure, why not? So what I'm planning on doing is I'm planning on going through all these technologies in extreme detail just to make sure that I've got them all covered. So if you look at things like DMVPN, GetVPN, IPsec, MPLS, GRE, tunnel endpoint selection, so on and so forth, then SD-WAN. You have to know SD-WAN on the WAN. It's just the reality. Whether it's Cisco or it's Palo or Fortinet or Velo or Prisma, or I'm thinking here, who else has SD-WAN out? There's a bunch of SD-WAN vendors out there, and I can't remember them all. But the key thing here is you have this technology thing that you have to go through, which if you read it, you'll notice that there's perimeter security, firewalls. So do you have to know firewalls? Well, guess what? You now need to go dig into firewalls. So you have to understand how application inspection works, and traffic zones, and PBR, and transport layer security inspection, and what are the different IPS modes, inline versus passive versus tap. Do you understand DOS versus DDoS? Man in the middle versus spoofing. So then you have some wireless stuff. So guess what? Now you have to go learn the wireless track. Do you have to become a CCIE in it? No. But you definitely have to understand how the technologies work in those respective areas. So what this really does is it gives you a very high level overview of all the different areas that you're going to get tested on, and these are going to be practical core technologies. So that means you have to be familiar with zero touch provisioning, automation tools, orchestration platforms. Am I going to become a programmer? Probably not, but I'm still going to need to know at a high level how CI/CD works and those details that go along with it. I do remember from the written exam, there were a handful of questions, and I believe it's up here, regarding project management and network management, stuff like FCAPS and TOGAF. So there's definitely some content in here that you're going to have to go through, which means that you're going to be doing some labbing. So now let's take it a step further, and let's take a look at the area where you're in the practical and you have to pick an area that you want to dive into. I would obviously go large scale networks, so that's where this would come into play. So what does that mean? I have to understand carrier Ethernet. Well, fortunately for me, I already know that because I work for a service provider and I understand Ethernet services really, really well. What about loop detection protocols? REP, Resilient Ethernet protocol. So it's basically kind of a sort of a replacement for spanning tree in ring Ethernet topologies from my understanding. Again, I have to go dig into this one. We have factors affecting convergence for transport, large scale NAT. I have to go dig into carrier grade NAT now because I don't know it as well. Multicast routing concepts. And this is where it's interesting to me. Pardon me real quick. As you start digging into these topics, you get multicast delivery implementations. So basically service provider is what this is leaning towards. Is you get MPLS segment routing, LDP and SR interworking, MPLS traffic engineering, diff-serve requirements, EVPN, security. You get unicast reverse path forwarding, RTBH. Guess what all that means, guys? That means service provider. So in the areas in which I actually need to bolster my understanding of the SP track, which means that by studying for the DE and prepping for large-scale networking, which I don't have to do, but if you look back over here, the practical, you have workforce mobility. So let's take a look at these two as well, just to make sure that I'm not being biased to large-scale networking, which is what I would probably go to anyway, because that's my area of understanding. If we look at, this is workforce mobility. So here we have ICE, and we have some wireless. So this is going to be more so focused on the wireless aspect. You know, people being able to pick up their laptop from their desk or their cube, and then walk to a conference room, or take their laptop home, and then connect it to their home internet connection, and then VPN back into the work, things like that. Obviously, there's a heavy wireless stance. If you're a wireless person, this might actually be a better fit for you. But what if you spend more time in cloud? Well, there's still quite a bit here. Let me zoom in on this real quick because it's be easier to see. Here we have inter-fabric connectivity such as multi-pod, multi-site. What does this right here mean? VXLAN, ACI. So that's where this would come into play, where data center interconnect options. So what are the capabilities of you moving data between your on-prem and your colo, things like that? Yeah, totally. Or you had two different data centers that you're ingesting traffic from, and there's a couple different designs that I can walk you through in order to make that work. Network virtualization, it's data planes such as VXLAN and MPLS, automation, data center, fiber channel and FCOE, zoning, trunking. So what's cool about this is the more I dig into it, and this is literally the first time I'm seeing any of this stuff because I just found it by digging into it. The interesting thing about this is if you take the time to go learn it, this is, in my opinion, is what makes an engineer better. Because if you take the time to actually learn how the technology works and get into it and understand its operations, whether you can actually demo it, lab it up or not, or if you just learn how this technology works, that's going to be a benefit to you. So the way that I would go about doing this is, obviously I'm going to be biased towards large-scale networking because that's a service provider area and I'm already generally familiar with that. What's cool about this now is because there's an area of expertise that I've got most of the stuff already down. I do have to spend some time in some areas, like I definitely need to spend more time in MPLS traffic engineering, QoS techniques, and things like that. But what's cool is I get to go build out labs and test this stuff out and demo it. And I'm going to start probably writing or authoring some content around this because it's going to be beneficial to me as I'm going through this. So I know I've, for those of you that have been following me for a little while, this is a topic area, or topics area, I should say, where the workbook that I'm currently in the process of developing for the CCNP track for enterprise, I'm now realizing that it goes into much more detail than I thought it did originally. And by digging into this, I'm starting to realize that I need to, like, okay, well, I need to start digging into the technology stack much more thoroughly, which, in my opinion, makes me a better engineer because now I'm going to know this technology far better. And there's other stuff in here like the wireless piece. One of the reasons why I've decided to go after DE, and even though now I have to go dig into service provider and some other stuff, and if you're doing your job correctly as when it comes to studying for a certification appropriately, what that basically means is that you should be studying everything that you need to in order to pass the exam you're going after. So, who's to say that Cisco won't throw you some curveballs while you're in the exam around wireless or around data center storage, application delivery, or VXLAN, VPN. So as I'm going through these things, I'm like, well, you know what? It would totally make sense to lab all this stuff up, test it out, make sure that I understand it. The bulk of it I do. So would I still have to go through SD-WAN, and would I like to do SDA? Because I think I think it's on this one right here. There's some SDA coverage. Yeah, they have some DNAC assurance and things like that. I am currently working on trying to get SDA to work. I have Catalyst Center. I'm going through some training on it, but I'm running into some issues right now. But again, I'm still learning. So my goal here is to use the large scale networking, because this will be my topic focus, to dig into all this stuff right here, and mess around with all these different technologies, understand how they work, all that type of stuff, lab them up, see what I have to go through to make them work, and then go progressively down that track. It's going to take some time, but that's the cool part, right? It gives me some time to dig into it and understand how the technologies work. So eventually I plan on knocking out the DE, but here's the thing. I need to dig into the technologies and understand how they work more thoroughly before I can say for a fact that I'm ready to go. Now, if we go back over here to the practical core technologies, there is a lot of stuff to cover that I've already done. But if you notice the security section, and we dig into the individual technologies, I have to go through and I have to lab some of this stuff up. Like or read up on it, like WPA, TKIP, AES. I know there's security technologies for wireless, but I definitely need to spend some more time digging into it. I need to probably go through some firepower training or dig into the ASA a bit more to understand how all this stuff works. And especially with network control and identity, I definitely need to understand how this stuff works with ICE, and especially this stuff with wireless. So my goal now isn't to focus on the areas that I'm already comfortable in. My goal is to focus on the areas that I don't feel as comfortable in, grow in these areas so that I can become more functional in them. So that means that the Cisco 2504 wireless controller that I have in my basement and the 33702 access points that I have will now probably get spun up, and I have Cisco ICE deployed. So I will more than likely go spend some time digging into getting that all working and getting that operational and understanding how that comes into play. Then do some firewall stuff. I have some ICE stuff that I have to go learn, quite a bit actually. Internal and external identity sources, certificate-based authentication, integration with multi-factor authentication, how that works. So I have a lot of reading to do, some labbing to go through. Now, the real question is, how much do you need to lab? I don't know. I don't know. But what I do know is that I learn better by doing. So that means to me that anything that I don't feel that I couldn't talk about off the top of my head. So, for example, clustering and high availability. I understand high availability really, really well. But clustering, on the other hand, I've never successfully deployed clustered ASAs. So that means that when I get to the security section for perimeter security and intrusion prevention and deployment modes, I need to go test that out. So what I recommend everybody does, if you're, regardless of what certification you're going after and or what level you're after, NA, NP, IE, or if you're going after some other vendor certification, take that blueprint, break it out into a spreadsheet, and I will show you what I'm talking about. Where did my spreadsheet go? Right here. So back when I was studying for the VMware VCIX, so for the VMware VCAP NSX deploy exam, this is what I did. I took the blueprint and I literally broke out all the different topics. So I went through the documentation and I went through and I labbed, I broke it out. Services, do I understand how layer 2 services work? Segments, segment profiles, layer 2 bridging, routing, load balancing, IPsec capability, clusters, NAT, DHCP, DNS, firewall capabilities. So I went through every bullet point on the VCAP NV exam. I broke it into a spreadsheet, and then as I was going through, I kept track of my progress. And so as I was going through, it's like, okay, did I read up on it and I took notes? Sure did. Did I test it out? I did. So what's cool about that is I can, for the most part, once I have the entire infrastructure stood up, so I have VMware data center deployed, I've got a handful of hosts, I've got vCenter rolled out, I've got my hosts joined to vCenter, I'm controlling everything through vCenter, I integrate vCenter and NSX together, and then I start working through the orchestration piece of NSX to deploy opaque networks to the VDSs and things like that. Then I started dealing with the routing and all that good stuff that goes along with it. There were a lot of capabilities out there that I needed to know. Did I take the time to go learn them? I did. And I passed the exam on the first attempt. But it was because of the fact that I had labbed everything up that I could. If I didn't know how to do it, if I couldn't lab it up due to one reason or another, a lot of it was licensing capabilities, especially when you get into the firewall. Distributed IDS wasn't supported because I wasn't running Kubernetes. I wasn't doing NSX intelligence. I didn't have a license for it. So what I did do is I read up on what the technology does, and then in the documentation it tells you how to turn it on. So I knew how to do everything, but just because I couldn't didn't mean just because I couldn't do it in a lab didn't mean it wouldn't be tested on in the exam. I don't remember how much of this stuff was actually tested on. Quite a bit was, but this was how I basically guaranteed my success in the exam. So that's what I'm probably going to do here. And as I'm going through all this stuff, I'm like, okay, there's a core technology section. So what I'm probably going to do is probably go through and anything that I can lab up, I'm probably going to do that. And I still had to figure out exactly how I'm going to attack this, but I have some ideas. And once I give those ideas some time to marinate and figure some stuff out, I will come back to you guys with some more information and things like that as we go forward. So, but what I do recommend you do, and I'm going to be doing this over the next week or so, is I'm going to be taking all these bullet points in here, because there's a lot. There's a lot in here to cover. But what it does is it gives me, it puts a target on the calendar. It gives me purpose to go after. I'm actually pretty excited about some of the stuff. I've never really dove into wireless. I have never really taken the time to learn firewalls to that level. So does that mean I have to go spin up FTD in wireless? It does, actually, for me. That's how I go about doing that. So I'm probably going to take the bulk of what I'm seeing here and in the large-scale networking, which one is this? The wireless piece, and then especially in addition to the cloud piece, because it would definitely help if I understood that better. But what I'm seeing here is a on-prem and a hybrid cloud design, but what I don't see in here is any actual cloud, like public cloud. Like you're building your own colo. You go out, you rent space from your local colo provider, and you take your hardware and you plug it into their environment, and then you start managing that equipment remotely. So there's a lot of stuff in here that I'm definitely going to be going through and reading up on. Do I think this stuff is going to be preparing me for wireless data center and service provider CCIEs? I don't. But it's going to be a good launching point based off of what I'm reading. So the cool thing about it is I like to learn. And if you don't, then this is going to be a complete waste of your time. If you do like to learn and dig into stuff, by all means, knock it out. If you guys want to throw comments in there and things like that and stuff like that, I'm all for it. So I have a lot of topics to go cover and go learn, but that's awesome to me. Like I'm like actually kind of geeked out. Like now I will be well, some things that I told some folks at the CCA party when I was there was that I'm planning on taking not digging into it right away. Now that I'm back from my vacation, I'm going to enjoy summer, so that means that I won't be in front of the computer as much. My amount of time in front of the computer will be minimized. I mean, other than having to do work, which my work laptop is over this way, but it is Father's Day, so I plan on relaxing a little bit and enjoying the day and doing stuff that I want to go do, which means I'm going to be throwing some lines in the water here in a little bit, doing some fishing. And I have a brisket on the smoker, which I'm actually really looking forward to for dinner. So, the summer, I'm going to enjoy it. I'm not going to try to dig into a certification prep. Once it starts to get cold up here in the upper Midwest and the Milwaukee area, I will start to dig into this more. But the cool thing about it is it gives me time. I have, actually, what is the practical? So obviously there isn't a lot of information here, but the cool thing is they give you a core technology list, which definitely helps. So with that, I can schedule this thing whenever, I believe. So they added an elective for AI, but I don't really care about that. So that's something that's kind of cool. I don't really care though. The I know the exam is gonna test on some really cool stuff, but I might have to go through. Let me go take a look at this V3. That's probably the exam I'm going to be taking. Let's see. Okay, so they added AI infrastructure. So let's take a look at the core technology list for V3.1, which looks to be the same. Maybe a little bit more with quick. That's funny. So let me zoom in here a little bit. I don't think I saw this before. Core technologies. Where was I looking at here? Let's move this over here to this guy. And so, yeah, they modified it a little bit. So let's see if we compare these two. Layer 3 control plane. Yeah, they revamped it a little bit. So if you're looking right here, 4.2a, 4.2 doesn't. So they modified it a little bit. They added in Lisp for overlay encapsulation, and they did that on purpose because that's what SDA uses. So anyway, it looks like they thinned out SD-WAN a little bit. So I'm going to have to go back through and see what my capabilities are for that. Actually, now that I'm digging into this, it looks like they changed things up just a little bit. Let's go back over here to 3.1 and let's look at large-scale networks. See if there's anything major rep. Nothing crazy. EVPN, yeah, all basically the same stuff. Flow spec. RPK. Okay, so What I'm going to be doing, okay, so just for clarity, because I won't be taking the exam until probably after that, I will start studying for the V3.1 on that. So I will probably put together some training and, oh, here, crosswork network automation. So that's for the large scale networks. So this is, if you don't know what crosswork network is, that's basically Network Services Orchestrator, CNC, Cisco Crossword Network Controller, CNC. NSO is a component of that. So that means I'll have to get NSO working and then use that to deploy MPLS VPN services or LDP services, however you want to look at it, Nexus or on the XR9K. So again, I have a lot to go through, but the cool thing about it is it gives me targets, it gives me goals, and I have a list of technologies that I have to go through, which means that if you're going after an expert level certification, you need to be an expert in that technology. So I have a lot to cover, and I'm actually looking forward to it because there's a lot of cool stuff that we have to go through. There's a lot of wireless um, that I have to go through, ZTNA, network control. There's still plenty of aspects of firewall that I have to go through. Plenty of stuff with security that I have to go dive into and understand. Same thing with SD-WAN, QoS, layer 3, layer 2 and layer 3 VPN and tunneling technologies. Then we have, yeah, there's a lot of stuff that I have to go over. So it's actually kind of cool now that I'm actually reviewing this again. There's transport technologies, layer 2 control plane, so there's a lot to go through here. Then basically it's routing and switching and service provider in the beginning, if you read through these. Then you get into hardcore service provider, LDP, RSVP, and BGP labeling, segment routing, hardcore service provider. Then you have overlay routing to VPN, get VPN, IPsec, MPLS, GRE, VXLAN, Lisp, and multi-protocol BGP, BGP eVPN, SD-WAN, network management techniques, security. Then you get into firewalls. Then you get into ICE. Then you get into wireless. And then, so now that I'm thinking about it, large-scale networking does make sense. So the only thing that they're not throwing at you is data center and collaboration. So that means that if we look at, no, that's not it. Let me look over here on the unified exam topics and look at on-prem and cloud services for V3.1. So DCI, OT, oh god, they got OTV back. Software-defined data center such as ACI, DC Fabrics, eVPN, VXLAN, OTV, etc. So that means I'll have to go dig into OTV. Yay. Which is actually kind of stupid because nobody uses OTV anymore. I don't know why they've got that added. Except, well, I shouldn't say that. It's not that nobody uses it. Every customer that I've ever worked with that's ran OTV in the past, I have ripped OTV out and replaced it with VXLAN. So UCS. So yeah, if I do that, and then they have workforce mobility, my suspicion is it'll be just another bunch of wireless and ICE. SD-LAN, SD access, and BGP, VPN, VXLAN, Meraki. Yeah, so I'm going to have to learn all this stuff anyway. So there's going to be a lot to go over. I'm actually really excited about it. So now that I'm looking through this, so there's going to be routing and switching, service provider, security, wireless. The only thing they don't throw is data center. So I might as well cover it anyway. So I'm going to have to come up with some ideas on how to go through about doing this. Because I know I talked about doing the Encore and Anarsi workbook specific to that. But now that I'm going through all of this, and let me go back over here to the core. Yeah, this should be, that's on-prem. I think it was this one. large scale network, wireless mobility workforce. No, let me close this one out. Unified topics 3.1 core. Here's the core. So we go through this real quickly again. I know, guys, I'm sorry. Transport technologies, layer 2 control plane, then layer 3 control plane, then data plane transport protocols, network and network virtualization, service provider, SD-WAN, security, firewalls, SXP, TAC, XPX grid, layer 2 security, wireless security, firewalls, zero trust, ICE, wireless. Yeah, the only thing they're not adding in here is data center. So as I'm going through this gives me a really good idea of a bunch of stuff to cover. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up with a game plan and I'll re-record this to some of the ideas I've got coming up here, where I will come up with a series of, instead of doing the Encore and an RC being specific to those, I think I'm going to broaden it. And it'll be probably, I have some ideas. Let me think through it because I don't want to waste any more of your time. I'm at 45 minutes already. But I want to thank you guys for stopping by and hanging out with me. But I will, once I have some time to suss this out, I will put together some stuff because there's a lot here. So there's literally layer 2, layer 3, all the IGP, all the routing protocols. Then you get into NAT, subnetting, multicast. Then you get into MPLS, segment routing, tunneling technologies, VPN, WAN, SD-WAN specifically, VXLAN, Lisp. Then you get into security, infrastructure security, protecting network services, perimeter security and intrusion prevention, zero trust. So literally there's multiple workbooks, I guess you could say, that could be written for this and gone through. Gives me a lot of stuff to go through, which is cool because in it there's targets. Anyway, I'm gonna let you guys go. I'm at 48 minutes. Thanks so much for stopping by, and I'll catch all of you in the next video.